Hi, my name is Keri Barnum, and I am the Executive Director for New Shelves Books. And today we are so pleased to be here with Jane Wood. And Jane, thank you for being here. It's so exciting.
I'm looking forward to it. I love talking about this subject.
Yeah. So today, what we're going to be talking about is how to market your book into schools. And Jane has just a little bit of experience with this. She actually wrote a book on it, which we have. And so it's Schools, a Niche Market for Authors. And this is a great little, just a play-by-play. It's got lots of helpful tips and easy reading. It's not super long. It gets straight to the detail you need, which I really appreciated because I like to get right to the point. Time is limited. And so where can people get connected with the book, Jane, if they would like to?
Well, certainly it's on my website, which is janewoodbooks.com. Mm-hmm. And it's available on Amazon. It's available through Ingram. So it's out there. When you order it directly from me, I can personalize it to you. I ship within 48 hours, which is always better than going through a distributor, but it's out there.
Perfect. And your website is Jane Wood Books, correct?
janewoodbooks.com.
Great. All right. So Jane, talking about getting into schools, is that still happening right now? I mean, it's 2021. Schools have been mostly virtual. Are you still working with schools, or has that been put on pause for right now?
A little bit on pause. Obviously, I'm not doing in-school author visits, which is what I usually do, but I'm doing a lot of virtual author visits. And schools are doing a lot of virtual anyway. Sometimes it's virtual talking to an entire class, and so that's the only picture you're seeing on the screen. Sometimes it's seeing the class, the kids that are in the school, and sometimes it's seeing multiple faces up on the screen because the kids are tuning in from home.
Right.
So definitely virtual author visits are still available, and I can talk more about the content of that later. But other things that you can do, and I spent a lot of time this summer doing it when I realized we were going to be doing virtual. Do read alouds, do videos of yourself doing a read aloud. If it's a children's picture book, of course, you can do that and hold up the pictures, or you can, depending on how tech savvy you are, you can put the, infuse still pictures of the pages you're reading from, or you can just simply do the read aloud. I usually, because I do chapter books, will just take an excerpt from one of my books and do the read aloud. And then because I take my books to historic settings, I like to weave a little history into my stories. I actually went down to St. Augustine and shot a little, almost a travel video of going through St. Augustine and showing the places that are actually featured in the books.
Good idea.
So there's a lot of things you can do with the technology. It's just getting creative because you're going to have to do it virtually for a while.
Right. Well, and I will say that with two kids my kids are hybrid, so they're in school 2 days a week and then they're home 3 days a week. And I will say that YouTube videos that's mostly what teachers are sending out to kids if they are not actually on screen teaching with them. So we're seeing that a lot, where if there are authors doing read-alongs, and certainly you can do still pictures and reading over top, or I've seen a lot of, all right, so we're going to read through this book and this is the line, and reading it, that way. And that type of thing, teachers are, I think, loving it because it's content that they can easily access and use, and they don't have to create it. It's something that they can use, and if they can work it into their curriculum, that's a huge benefit, especially right now where teachers are trying to keep up with the demand of, videos and technology, and sometimes doing in-class and videos.
That's true. I put them up on my website, which as a resource, but they're also with YouTube. And so teachers can access it when they want it. And that's, convenient for them.
Absolutely.
You can also go live and do it via Zoom or Skype. And there's so many platforms today. So yeah, when I do the virtual ones with schools, I always check with the teacher to find out what kind of platform they're using, because sometimes it's something that they have to log me into because of security. You've just got to deal with all those issues, which is why if you're going to do something virtual with the school, make sure you do a test the day or a couple days before, so you work out all those kinks. And sometimes teachers will access it from home when they do the test, and then when they get to the school, it doesn't work the same way. So you want to do a test with the school when they're in school.
Right. And that's a good point too, because I know like my kids use Microsoft, but a lot of people are using Google Classroom. So there's a lot of different options on there. So that's a really good point. Now, and of course it's 2021, that's for right now, but eventually, hopefully kids will be back in school and we'll have author visits back again. So I want to know, and you had written a blog for us, and I want to talk about that a little bit, about how to actually get in to schools. How, when schools are looking for books, who do you contact and how do you get them to actually read your email or take your call?
Well, a lot of people think that, oh, I can just call the district office because there's 30 schools or 100 schools, and they'll just pass my information out to all the schools. Doesn't really work that way. They aren't into promoting you. It's good to make a connection with them so they know who you are and what you're offering to the schools in their district, but don't expect them to open the door for you. Basically, it's one school at a time. You want to have an in there if possible. It can be a teacher, it can be a media specialist, it can be a parent that bought one of your books and said, oh, I'd love to have the school see this.
Right.
So you want to contact somebody at the school, preferably. Now, if you're just doing a cold call, you don't know anybody at the school, and I do this a lot when I travel. If my husband still likes to ski, so we go to Breckenridge, and I will go online and look at the schools in that district, and I will usually contact the media specialist or librarian first. They're the ones that usually schedule an author visit, or they're the ones that are going to buy the books, and send them an email. They like emails because they're busy. You know, you pick up the phone and you call them. They may have a class there. Send them an email so they can respond in their own time. Keep it short and simple. I mean, if they're very interested, they're going to get back with you with minimal information, and then you can give them more details. But if you're just calling them, picking up the phone and calling them, sometimes that doesn't work so well. Now, if you've made connection via email and a media specialist or a teacher responds, then you may want to pick up the phone and call them and just say, when would it be convenient for us to talk? It's like marketing with anything. You want to be very aware of their schedule. Yep. And usually, like I said, it's the media specialist. It might be a reading teacher or a reading coach. It might be a grade level teacher, 5th grade, 8th grade, high school. But basically, it's contact the media specialist first.
Right. And media specialists usually are in the library. Is that correct for schools?
That's true. You can usually find their email address on the school website. Now, not all schools do that. Then you just call the number of the main office and say, you'd like to connect with the media specialist. May I have that email address, or or the phone link? Again, you don't want to be a pest, but at the same time, you can usually get their email address by calling the school.
Right. And so, and guys, I want to remind you too that media specialists are usually working in the library, and there are over 97,000 school libraries in the US alone. So that's a lot of opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of schools, a lot of school districts, and a lot of opportunity. And it's great because you really can target the places around you or around your planned travel so that you can kind of get to different places. There's no extra cost to them. It gives you opportunity. So I think that's fantastic. And one of the things that you had really talked about in your article was about not just trying to promote yourself, but bringing good content that you are going to help the school or the library. So talk to us a little bit more about that. How do we know what to tell the school?
Well, the first priority in getting your books, getting interest from the schools in your books, is being something that reinforces their curriculum, something that reinforces what they're having to teach in the classroom. Schools have limited budgets and they have limited time. Those teachers are having to teach certain things. They've only got so many hours in each day, so many days in the week to teach it. And particularly now with standards, they've got to hit the target. So if you don't have content in your book that is helping them in their classroom, they don't have time or money to fool with it. Mm-hmm. So the key is having material, subject material in your books that's going to help a teacher in the classroom. Now, people say, well, how do I know what it is they're teaching? The easiest way is to go either to the district website and to the state website and look at their standards. I mean, we used to call them Common Core standards. That kind of became a dirty word for a while. But I got to tell you, looking at the standards that were Common Core standards and the standards that schools and states are doing today, they're very similar. They just took the name away. And quite frankly, people are teaching the same thing across the country when it comes to math, science, social studies. They're teaching the basics. Right. And so you want to go see what the standards are for that district and that state that you're trying to market your books to. And it's very simple. Usually they'll be in subject areas like math, science, social studies, language arts, and then you can get into more details. The good news is I've noticed over the past few years where some states had very detailed standards. I mean, really gets into the weeds, and it really kind of tied the hands of teachers. I mean, they had to cover so many of these details. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing today a lot of states that the standards have become much simpler, and it gives a lot more flexibility to the teachers to be able to teach in a way that they're comfortable with. So it's all about content. Your book has to have some content that reinforces what's going on in the classroom. And if you've already written the book, I mean, obviously, if you're writing a book, you can weave some of that into it. Do your research, do your homework, target a grade level, target a subject, find out what those are. And then if you've already written a book, go back and look at it and see where there's things that are compatible with what they're having to teach.
Right. Well, and I think that's important too, is that realizing just because they're teaching about paleontology doesn't mean that you have to have a book that is all about paleontology. It could be about dinosaurs. It could be about fossils. Like, there's so many places outside of that. You just have to find the angle of how your book fits. And it's also important to note that not only are there standards for each school, but there are by the state, usually, I think is what it is. But they also change by the grade so that you can actually see and try to say, okay, my book is good for K through second. Does it fit into all of them? Could it fit in one better than others? Because the more targeted you are, the more that it shows them that you've taken the time to find their needs and that you're offering a service rather than just, promote me. And when speaking of, of course you're going to kind of promote yourself because they're your books and kids talk and they say, oh, mommy, I read this book in school today and I loved it and that kind of thing. So how do you translate a book in a classroom to sales? How do you, if they're especially younger kids, now, of course, if they're teenagers, if they're adults, they're going to go right on to Amazon or whatever. And most of them, they've got their own accounts half the time. But for younger kids, how do you translate that over into extended sales or to not stopping in the classroom?
There's several ways you can do that. If you're going to talk to younger kids, say K through 2, you're probably not going to sell a lot of books just because it becomes a logistics thing. I target third, fourth, and fifth grade. And if you did this at that level or middle school or high school, I send home a student discount order form a week to 10 days before I do my author visit. And it has information in there a little bit about what my books are about. I've got a series, so I have 5 books. I list them and the price and the discount. Of course, parents love discounts.
Yeah.
I mention in the form that I will sign and I will personalize any books purchased by students. That's a big marketing tool. And so the kids then bring that form filled out with a cash or a check. I always suggest to the teachers, have them bring it back in a sealed envelope. That way the teachers don't have to deal with the money at all. And then the day of my school visit, they give the envelopes to me, and I will either go early or stay late, and I'll sign and personalize the books for the kids that day. Or some schools will send me the list of all the books, almost as simple as an Excel sheet. You know, Johnny wants this book, and or what books they want, and I can pre-sign them and personalize them before I bring them to the school. That's the easiest way to do it. With virtual schooling now, and I have found the teachers are still very willing to take the orders, send me the list, and then they will usually send me one check. They'll take all the cash and the money. I don't fool with credit cards when I'm doing school visits, unless I'm doing an event at the school that night, parent night, reading night, and I've got a vendor table. I can do credit cards then. But I deal with cash and checks, and that's the easiest way to do it. Now, if you're at middle school and high school, those kids sometimes will just bring money with them. They can buy their own books. But I have found sending the student discount order form home, 10 days or a week before I'm going to do a school visit or something, that works best, and it works best for the school.
Yeah. Have you found that with older kids, let's say like middle and high school, if you have a chapter book, a poetry book, something that could be tied into the curriculum, have you found, or do you have an opinion on trying to get that book actually read in the school? Like, I think this could be good in your curriculum, and actually trying to get the entire class to read the book?
It's like any marketing effort. If you were trying to get into a bookstore, or you were trying to approach an organization that you would like to speak at, like a historical society or a Rotary Club or a women's, you've got to target your pitch or your marketing to that group. So if you're targeting say a high school poetry class or a high school English class, you're going to target the creative writing teacher or the poetry teacher. And you're going to hit those points that we already talked about. How does this fit into your curriculum? You just have to get creative. It's know your audience. If you're talking to high school English teachers, or you're talking to a middle school social studies teacher, you've got a book that is very compatible with what they're teaching at 8th grade history, then those are the points you're going to make to that particular teacher or administrator. There's a lot of books out there. People think the only way you can get into schools is elementary schools with picture books and chapter books. I see a lot of books that are appropriate for middle school and high school. And the other thing to consider about high school and even middle school is sometimes the English teacher just wants you to come in and talk about the writing process. Because you're an author and you can go in and share that. Now, you might not sell as many books as you would if you're talking about the content of your book, but it's getting your foot in the door with that school and that district. And so sometimes, it's just part of your marketing budget and your marketing time budget. You're trying to establish a relationship, which is what marketing is all about anyway.
Right, exactly. Do you have any experience with getting books into colleges on that level, and how would it be different from K through 12?
I have not targeted colleges. However, when I went on WorldCat looking at libraries that have my books, I found some colleges that do have my books in their catalog, in the, in their shelves. And I'm assuming it's the College of Education that has got them there, because I've actually done workshops before where there have been college students there, and there have been teachers there that said, I went to XYZ college, and your books would be great to talk to interns and students that are going into education. This is a good way to help teach social studies or science. It makes it fun and exciting for the kids. So I have not technically contacted colleges and universities, but I do see that there's some interest there.
Okay. Well, and I think I believe that college professors have a little bit more autonomy on the books they choose to use and to work with also, which is a huge perk. The availability to kind of go through, because sometimes with schools and K through 12, there's a lot of red tape. It has to be approved. I know in my area, the Board of Education actually has to approve books before they can come into the school. So that can be a process, whereas with colleges, it's not nearly as hard. So in Tara saying one of their books was gotten into an MBA program. So I think that is where you really have to foster the education, or the department head. Yes. Or the individual professor, I think, is where I would be going. So if you have a book that concentrates on, maybe it's just literary fiction, going to a literature professor, or if you have poetry, going to a professor who teaches a class on poetry, different things like that. And think out of the box too. If you have a book that heavily features, I don't know, maybe it's like you said, a children's book. So maybe it's an education program, but you have children's books that you think would work well in that program. Thinking outside of the box, I think, that is where your key is, because a lot of people are probably going directly to, it just makes sense. I have a literature book, or I have a literary fiction book. So of course it would be great for literature, but can you take that out into a different field? And that's where I think you'll have a lot of niche success of hitting the market. Now, one of the questions we have in from Randy is, in your experience, do you find one's alma mater more receptive to stocking their book than any other university? So that's university in particular, but I think it could be for any school. Do you think that if you have a personal connection to a school, that they're more willing to have you for a visit, to stock your book in a library, for colleges, that kind of thing?
Certainly, and I take advantage of that whenever I can. But you know what they say about a prophet in his own land. I have found that locally, I get a lot of repeat author visits, and schools that will order my books again and again. One of the unique things about marketing to schools is you might sell some books to a school, and 2 or 3 years later, they have a whole new crop of kids coming in, and those kids haven't seen the book. So it's not like once they've read it, it's old news, because every year they have new kids coming. So I have a lot of repeat business with schools because they know me. I've done author visits there. They know my books. They approve of my books. And yes, sometimes you have to get approval. And that's just, again, a part of your marketing budget. You're going to give them a copy. If you want them to carry your book in the school, give a free copy to the media specialist. And many times they have a committee at the district level that's going to review books. Give them some copies so they can preview it. And then that's how you get your foot in the door. But I have found that it's just as easy to get in places that don't know me, as long as you have a good pitch. When I'm pitching to a district, say my husband and I are going to travel and I'm going a cold call to an area, one of the first things I offer in my email to that, whoever I'm sending it to, is I offer to send them a free copy of one of my books. And I can tell you the return on that investment has been very, very good. There's very few times that I've sent a copy of one of my books to a media specialist or a teacher, and not gotten some kind of order. And usually I get an order, and sometimes I book a school visit, and then I can sell books to the students as well. So, you're making a marketing investment.
Right. And I agree with that. I think that anytime we're pitching someone and trying to get them to stock our books, especially if it's multiple copies, offering them, and sometimes they'll say, oh no, just send a PDF and I'll just look at it that way. Or there are times that they will do that, but always be willing to send it, to send a physical copy, to send it nicely packaged, and all of those things. Because if you send your book and it looks like the old ratty copy you've had on your shelf for 5 years, they're not gonna respect you and your pitch very much. And speaking of your pitch, I know you said that you do email. What does your pitch look like? Does it tell them how your book relates to their standards, or like what goes into your pitch?
I keep it very simple. I'm Jane R. Wood. I'm the author of a series of 5 juvenile fiction books where I weave history and science into stories filled with mystery and adventure for young readers ages 8 to 14. You just got my elevator speech. But I put that in there so that they have all the details very succinctly. They're fiction books, the age group. I weave history and science into my storylines. So then I can talk a little bit about standards. And I've already done my homework, and I know what grade levels and what subjects I'm pitching to them. Again, 2 or 3 sentences. And then I offer to send them a free copy. I also have my flyer that describes my sell sheet that describes all of my 5 books, which I can send them as a PDF. And the beauty of sending it as an email, yes, as an email, then, and anybody that wants to see that, it's on my website. You can go to my website and get those. But the beauty of an email is if a media specialist gets it and says, oh, this would be great for Mrs. Jones and Mrs. Smith and, Mr. Sam's, they can forward your email with your PDF flyer to them. And now you've got the whole department looking at it. And frequently it'll go to the principal as well, particularly if you're going to have an author visit where you're charging for your author visit. At some point, somebody's got to make the budget decision. So that's why I really like using email. And the other side of that is if the school doesn't have the money and they're not interested, they just don't respond. You haven't tied up their time. You've put it out there. But another interesting thing is I've sent those kind of emails before saying, I'm going to be in your area on these dates. Would you be interested in an author visit? And they're not available then, but I get an email a year later. Are you coming back? When are you going to be here? Because sometimes they hold on to those things. And many elementary schools, more elementary than middle schools or high schools, the media specialist will budget money for an author visit or some kind of guest speaker. It's not always the author. Sometimes they bring in a clown. Sometimes they bring in, but they have a budget for that.
Yeah.
So again, if you've got a window of dates that you're going to pitch it, or you're just going to pitch it anytime that year if it's fairly local, you can state that and ask them, to respond. And maybe you can find a time that's convenient for both of you to, number 1, discuss it, or number 2, actually do the virtual visit or the in-school visit.
Yeah. Now, speaking of charging, is there a range that's commonly acceptable or expected for author visits?
I will tell you, if you're just starting out and you're going to do some locally, it's great to do them for free. I mean, that gets your foot in the door, and that's how I started. However, if now when I am going anywhere, I say outside of 100 miles of where I live, I do charge. I get $350 for half a day, which is 2 sessions, or $600 for a full day. And that's 4 sessions. A lot of my author friends say, Jane, you're not charging enough. I have friends that get $750. I have a friend that gets $1,500 a day with a 2-day minimum. I mean, you've just got to look at what the market is. I've worked with schools before where I've told them what my fee is, and they say, well, we don't have $350, but we got $200. And I say, well, would you be willing to buy $150 worth of books so that we've hit the 350? But it's all negotiable. I mean, right. I can tell you, I've done a lot of them for free. But if the school's willing to buy books, or they're going to let me sell books to the kids, I don't need that speaking fee. I'd rather sell the books, mainly because I'm a former teacher and I want kids reading. If they're going to give me $350 in book sales or $350 to speak, I just soon get the book sales. But when you're first starting out, you really got to test the waters as to what the market can afford. Yeah. And doing them for free to get started, and then say, well, I'll do the first one for free, but next year I'm going to have to charge.
Yeah. Speaking of selling books, is that something that's always allowed? Is that something that you should ask if you can sell books? How does that work?
No, it's not always allowed. And yes, you do need to ask. Just take care of all of that up front. When I connect with the school, I make it very clear that I do want to sell books to the students. I have only, and I've been doing this now for 16 years, I've only had maybe 2 schools that whole time say, we really want you to speak, but you can't sell any books. Well, if they're going to pay my fee, I'll still do it. Right. If I can't sell books to the students, then, I've got to decide, is it worth my time? Now, with a virtual visit, it's not that big a deal. I've given them 45 minutes or 60 minutes of my time. I didn't have to get in the car and schlep any books and drive anywhere. That's not such an issue. But if a school wants me to come speak and they're not going to pay me and they're not going to buy any books, I'm not so sure I'm going to do that.
Right. And that makes sense. But it's good to know that you shouldn't assume that you do need to ask. And I would especially think that would maybe apply in certain school districts. Anywhere that is a low-income school district, I know that they can be a little bit more careful about not wanting kids to feel left out. So that's something to consider as well as the school district you're in.
Sorry, phones are ringing. Everything's happening. I put my cell phone on mute, but
I had the same thing happen. Oh, that's life. That's all right. Now, for schools, have you ever seen, I know that, you were a teacher, so you worked in the school system. What about people pitching books for parents, like to PTSA, or like maybe I have a book on how to save for college and I want to pitch it to PTSA as an event, something like that. Have you ever seen that work out?
That's a great thing to do. I love to speak at PTA meetings or PTO meetings or whatever the parent group is. And how I get my foot in the door is I don't want to just go and pitch my book. I don't want them to think, well, here's that lady trying to sell her books. I do a session on tips on how to get your kids or your grandkids to read. And you can find those on the internet. And they're very basic things. They need to see you reading. You need to have reading material in the house. You need to take them to the library. There's all kinds of strategies. So I get my foot in the door by giving them something that they need. And then I always ask to be a vendor and have my back of the room, have a table in the back of the room sales. And I talk a little bit about my books, not a whole lot. You can talk to other groups, other parent groups. If you talk to a women's group or a Rotary Club or something like that, a lot of church groups will invite you to speak, because people are concerned about getting kids to read. Yeah. If you look at the statistics, kids that are not reading on grade level by 3rd or 4th grade have a 1 in 4 chance of not graduating from high school. And those statistics go up every year. When I first started, it was not that high. Now it's the percentages go up. Now that's an old percentage, go up every year. So the community has a stake in getting kids reading. They want them to graduate. Yep. If they can't read on 3rd and 4th grade reading level, they lose a lot of their education in middle school and high school. Because think about it, how much reading is involved in social studies and science and math.
Yeah.
If they can't read, you know, they're losing their education. And if they drop out, then we have all kinds of community and society problems.
Yeah.
That's another way I get speaking gigs on TV and radio shows is I don't go in saying, oh, I want to come talk about my books.
Mhm.
I say, I want to talk about how it's important to get kids reading. And then I can say the reason kids will read my books because they're fun and teachers like them because they're educational.
Right.
So again, know your audience, have your pitch designed to who you're speaking to. If you're going on a radio show and you're going to talk about, you know, your books, talk about how you like to go to schools and speak because kids are learning something. And it's important that kids are reading and it's important that kids are improving their literacy skills.
Right. Well, and I think one of the things you said right there was fill a need. You have to find the pain point and then tell them, don't make them wonder if you can fill that. Tell them, I know this is a pain point and this is how I can help, either as an author, as a writer, as someone who's got books that can fill that need. When you present a solution to a problem, you will be received so much more quickly than if you just go, here's my book, it's all about me, me. But if you are presenting a solution to a problem, it's like, oh, you want to help me with my problems and do something about it? I don't know too many people are really, yeah, no thanks. I mean, yes, you could plug that hole in my wall, but no thank you. Because we like people who are going to come help us, who are going to offer a service or offer something that makes our life easier. And I think that is the lead. And that's one of the mistakes most authors make when they are pitching, is that they pitch themselves instead of pitching the school or pitching the college. You have to pitch their need, not you.
When my 5th book came out, there's a local radio show that everybody listens to. It's on our, PBS affiliate. And she had me previously. And my pitch to her was not that, oh, I've got my 5th book out and I want to talk about it. Yeah. I pitched to her that I want to talk about how we can get kids reading and what's exciting about this book. And I got the gig. And so I had, 15 minutes talking about how we can get kids reading. And then, of course, I would weave it into that particular book, which happened to take place in Boston. And so I could talk about how it helped kids learn about the history in Boston and the American Revolution and other things. So you got to kind of tweak it towards exactly what you're saying. Any way you would market something. Don't say, I just want to talk about my new book. I want to talk about how we can get kids reading in the 5th grade.
Right. And it's also, we talked about pitching locally, pitching to the school you went to or your kids are going to, but also if your book is in a certain location, pitch that location. If your book is in Boston, pitch Boston schools. If your book is in at the beach, pitch Florida, pitch Virginia, North Carolina. Pitching where the book is set at can also work, as well as pitching things that are close to you. I always say make a personal connection or make a connection to your book. And personal connections are great because you can either say, I went to this school, my kids are going to this school, or, there's some connection here. And I think that that does two things, because number one, schools, especially colleges, I'll say this especially for colleges, if you have a connection there, they want their students to see people who have gone to that college in the past who are now succeeding. And they want that tie-in, because not only is it filling a need of their curriculum, but then it's tying in that, yes, this person went here, they graduated, and now they're successful, and you can do it too. And so I think, again, that personal connection is so smart, and play on it. I mean, don't be too obvious, but play on it, because it will take you a little bit further.
You can also frequently get in their alumni news in their magazine or newsletter. So-and-so class of XYZ just published her 4th book, And, you know, sometimes they'll put the book cover image, sometimes they'll put your photo. But yeah, those are all good ways to market your books.
Yeah, find the connection. And yes, it does take a little bit more time. I will say a lot of times authors say, well, I just want to do the most as quickly as possible, which there's something to be said for that, for putting out a blast to schools or to doing different things. But your conversion rate when you take the time to personally tailor it either to the state, the school, that conversion will be much higher than if you just kind of blast out to everybody and hope that it's like, you know, you throw something up in the air and you're hoping that it lands in the right spot, opposed to actually taking the time to target and throw it where you want it to go. So they're both things.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have a great story that emphasizes that.
Mm-hmm.
My first book came out in 2004. It's called Voices in St. Augustine. And it's very popular with fourth grade classes in Florida because that's where they study Florida history. So the book came out in 2004. A lot of schools in my area, all over Florida, used that book. In 2014, 10 years later, I got a purchase order from a large school district in Florida, and they ordered 6,400 copies of that book. The reason is because for 10 years, teachers had been using my book in their class for Florida history. And when the superintendent said, I want our kids learning history through fiction, the fourth grade teacher said, we want Jane's book. So when you talk about things happening quickly, that was a 10-year span. And 10 years later, 6,400 copies. That was a great purchase order. I bought a new car that year. You don't get that every year. But, you know, it was, so many teachers had used it and liked it that when the opportunity came along, I was able to have a big sale with that. And I frequently will get other things like that. Not that many sales in one purchase order, but I have schools that will order 200 copies every year, and they have their class read it, and then they have me do the school visit, and then the kids order books. Right. So it's you've got to be in it for the long haul. You've got to realize that it's not going to happen instantaneously.
Right. Well, in most books, I will tell you, both indie and traditionally published books, most books, yes, they will sell when they first come out, but most of their sales happen between years 9 and 10. It happens later as the book has built up the reputation, and that's where you can see a bigger lift sometimes. And so I think that backlisted books they're still viable, especially if they're in a series. Every time you have a series, your first book suddenly becomes popular again because then people are reading through. And Jane, when you were going to bookstores, obviously they could order through Ingram, Bicker and Taylor, whatever it is, but do you also offer them a school discount directly?
If a school is going through a bookstore, they've got to pay whatever the bookstore is going to charge. And that happens sometimes. And I'll get orders from Barnes & Noble. They want 150 books shipped to Orlando. And I know it's going for a school. Yep. That's between the school and the bookstore. If they order them directly from me, I give them a discount. And most schools have figured that out. And on my website, I actually have a copy of the school discount order form if somebody wants to look at that. And you feel free to copy it or use it or use it as a model for something you want to do. So most of the time, and sometimes the schools will order through bookstores, but maybe they'll do it the first year and then they realize the second year that it's less complicated if they order it directly from me because I'm going to ship them faster and we don't have to go through all of that. Although I do have one bookstore that every year there's a school in their neighborhood that orders through the bookstore. And they only order about 20 or 25 books, but I'll do that all day long.
Right. Is there a set discount amount that you give? Is it by the book or do you give like 40%? Or
I think the discount, I'll tell you, my books retail for $8.99. They're paperback. I can hold one up. They're paperback. They're chapter books. I sell them for $8.99, all of them. I sell them to schools for $7, and I sell them to students for $8 because I have to pay sales tax on the students. And I'm not going to fool with, I'm going to keep them round numbers, 7, 8. When I do, like I'm doing a school event where it's this reading night and you're there with the parents, I can offer a discount. Now, I'm an indie author, and I order a lot of books through Offset, so I have a good inventory, and I can do that. People that use a traditional publisher sometimes have issues. They can't offer the discounts. And they have to, the school has to order it directly from the publisher or through Ingram or Baker and Taylor or Follett, and I use all of those as well. But the schools that I deal with, once I have a relationship with the person at that school, usually the media specialist, I can tell them that it's going to be a lot easier if they just order them directly from me. They'll get them faster. I can autograph all of them if they want, which is a challenge when they order 300, because I'm sitting here signing 300 books. But you know what? I can do that. And then I ship them, or if it's local, I can deliver them myself. And so it's just, everything is negotiable.
Right.
It's just a matter of how they want to do it. Now, there are some private schools that they only want to deal with a distributor, and that's fine. I don't make as much money, but I'm still selling books.
Right, and your name's still getting out there. With private schools, are they harder to reach than public schools?
No, frequently they're easier because they have a lot of autonomy. And each private school has their own set of restrictions. As long as you know what they are, they'll bring it up. They'll ask you, they'll ask you specific things. Public schools, a lot of times the teachers will say, well, we can't allow you to sell books, or there's certain things they don't want you to talk about. There's just a lot more restrictions depending on how conservative that district, that school is. So you just need to be aware of who your audience is, and then, hit those targets.
Right. I think that's important too. And I agree that those private schools, sometimes they do have more autonomy. They have more options. My in-laws have both worked in private schools and in Christian schools. And as long as it meets certain criteria, they have a lot of flexibility and options to be able to bring in their own curriculum and things like that, which I think is a big deal.
There's a lot more flexibility, and quite frankly, the kids have a lot more expendable income. I have a series, and I would mention, if you're considering writing for books for schools or writing books for kids, plan on doing a series, because when my schools order one of my titles, and everybody in the 4th grade or 5th grade reads it, and they maybe only ordered 6 copies for the school, and every 6th grade teacher got a copy and she read it aloud or whatever, or they ordered one classroom set, and when Mrs. Jones' class finished, then she sent it to Mrs. Smith's class. That's basically how it works. But the kids have read that one book. When I visit the school, they buy the other 4 because they like my characters. And I've gone to schools where I've sold as many as 300 books just to the kids. The series is very popular for sales with kids' books. Again, mostly at the elementary level. Middle school too. Those YA books, kids love, girls in particular, they love a series. And if they've read one at school, then they want to buy the other books in the series.
They like the familiarity of characters. My kids do that, where they're like, we got this at the library and now I need all 25. And I'm like, great, go do some chores.
Exactly. So having a series is a great marketing and sales strategy.
Yeah, I agree. Do you offer classroom materials or discussion questions? Do you offer anything like that to teachers, or do you just speak?
No, I do. And remember, I'm a former teacher and I've actually got a master's in education. So schools think of me not as that author coming in here to sell her books. They think of me as one of them. But you don't have to be a teacher, a former teacher, or have a degree. You can create vocabulary words, and I do them by chapter. I do discussion questions by chapter. If it's a really young age, I sometimes do coloring sheets. I have that mostly when I have them at a vendor table for the younger kids. I do puzzles and games. I do a thing called the electronic scavenger hunt. And each of my books takes place in a historic location. I mentioned Boston, I mentioned St. Augustine. I have one in Savannah and Charleston. So my electronic scavenger hunt will ask the kids 10 questions, send them to a website that has something to do with Savannah, Charleston history or something. And then I ask them a question and they have to go to that website to get the answer to the question. So the kids are learning some more history. They're also practicing their research skills and their computer skills. And kids love that. I've spoken at schools before. I was lucky when I was in Colorado one year. I spoke at a school on 2 different days, the same school. And I had done the school visit the first day, and the second day when I went back, the teacher took me into the computer lab and said, look, all the kids are doing your electronic scavenger hunt because they got so excited about it. Anybody can go to my website, and I have all of those on my website. You just click on one of the books and go down, and it has resources. But anybody can do vocabulary words and discussion questions. If you want to get a little more detailed and put some standards up there, and you don't know how to do that, go find a teacher that teaches at that grade level. Pay them $100 or $200, whatever you're comfortable with, and ask them, would you give me a list of standards? Give them a copy of the book, of course.
Right.
Say, would you give me a list of standards that are being reinforced at your grade level with my book? And you've got another teacher resource that you can offer. And not only are those valuable when the teachers actually are using the books, because a lot of teachers Sunday night, they're saying, oh, I'm doing one of Jane's books. I don't have to do a lesson plan because here I've got the vocabulary words. Here I've got the discussion questions. That's very valuable to get those repeat visits because they know every year they can do that. But it's also valuable when you're marketing. And if you're talking to a principal or you're talking to somebody that's doing curriculum, and they say, wow, look at all these resources that she's done to make it more valuable for using in the classroom. So it's a win-win. The teachers get to use it. It helps with your marketing.
Right. And I mean, and what's nice about that is you get to reuse it over and over. It's not like you're making it for each classroom. It's something that's just available across the board. And I think that's super cool that you're able to do that. And a lot of times for older books, if you're looking at, more adult fiction, young adult, you can also use those same discussion questions for libraries. So it can double up as well in that way. And I like to work once and use it twice, so that appeals to me. And I know anyone with older discussion books. Now, of course, with the younger grades, it's a little bit different. They're not so much sitting down and having maybe story time, but not discussion group. And kids don't want to sit there and write vocabulary words if they don't have to. But as adults, I think it's so weird. We finish school and then we go back to like book discussion groups where we talk about things and try to dig deeper. It's like we miss learning.
That's true. One of the things that we haven't talked about, and I'll mention it briefly, is there's a lot of other ways you can sell books and market books through schools. They have after-school programs, and those people have a budget. I've gone to schools where they would invite me to come for 4 weeks straight every Wednesday after school. And we would be reading, it was like a book club. We'd be reading 4 or 5 chapters and then I'd discuss it. They paid me to come do the visit. They bought the books for all the kids. I think that school did 50 or 60 books. And then again, the kids wanted to buy the other 4. So you can do after school programs. There's summer reading programs. It's like a book club. There's boys clubs and girls clubs. There's Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. There's homeschool groups. There's a lot of other groups out there that are trying to get kids reading that's not just in the classroom. So there's opportunities there as well.
Yeah, and for anyone who does have books that can go up through K through 12, do not forget those homeschool groups, because keep in mind that every parent is a teacher. And if they are sold on your book, that means every single child is getting that book. I was homeschooled, and so I know that even though my brother and I were in the same grade and we could share books, we didn't. We each got our own. And so if we had a homeschool group, which are very popular, especially in some states, if you've got a homeschool group of 20 kids, and then each of them is getting a book and the parent is going to see that, like, yay for homeschooling. That's
and
right.
that works in with the virtual learning right now, because you can be talking to 20 kids that are, you know, on a homeschool group, and it lends itself to that.
It sure does. I mean, I think that is an excellent way when you're talking about getting in and actually selling books. Of course, you want to talk to kids, but as far as actually selling books, homeschool groups, and I will say also, not very many people pitch homeschool groups. I think sometimes they're kind of forgotten, and they are hungry for resources. And there are a lot of co-ops that would even do author visits and things like that. And much like private schools, there's quite a bit of times when homeschool groups may have disposable income, or the parents will pull together for author events and groups, you know, for payment and things like that. So don't overlook those groups.
No, there's a lot of different ways that you can market, not just in the classroom, but relates back to education and relates back to literacy, getting kids reading. One of the things we didn't talk about is Title I schools. I mean, I love to go to a school and sell 300 books. When you go to a Title I school, you're not going to sell a lot of books to the students. But Title I schools, number one, they get government funding, so they will usually buy a classroom set. But those kids really touch my heart. These are kids that are in low income areas. It's a Title I school because of the amount of free and reduced lunch that they have at that school. And those kids, if they meet an author, it makes a major impact on them. It's a big deal. So even though I don't sell as many books when I do Title I schools, I feel like I'm helping, maybe there's a spark there that I can ignite to get them to want to read more. And I've, many times I've donated extra copies to the school library. They were only looking at one book, and I'll give them the other 4. Because I want those kids reading. And Title I schools, they kind of have a soft spot in my heart. And don't overlook those, because you want to get these kids reading.
That's right. It just reading makes for a better world. So
and it might not be that you got a bigger paycheck that week, but you got paid in another format. And that's important too.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Jane, it's 11 o'clock. We've taken up an hour of your time, and you have been fabulous. You've given us so many ideas of how to reach out, how to be helpful, how to think outside the box. And that is the key to marketing. That is the key to standing out, is doing something different, is making sure that you are meeting a need. Thank you so much. It was so helpful to have you here. And people can find you again. It's janewoodbooks.com. They can find your book, of course, online. And that, again, you guys, I'll hold it up. It's Schools, a Niche Market for Authors. And so that's there. Any part?
And there's all my resources are there. They can look at them, how I did vocabulary words, how I did discussion questions. They can look at some of the electronic scavenger hunts and puzzles and games. So, take advantage of that, because I don't want this just to work for me. I want more authors out there getting into schools, and I want to get kids reading. So use what you want, or feel free to email me. It's jane@janewoodbooks.com, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you've got.
Well, that is so generous of you, and I love it. We appreciate you so much, and we will see everybody else, and probably Jane as well. We'll see everyone next week at 10 a.m. Eastern for Free Advice Friday. Be sure to go check out Jane's book at janewoodbooks.com. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.